The Hog's Die is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsdie.com.
The Hog's Die presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hog's Die Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports industrial complex. I'm joined by my compatriots, as always, Rich and Steve. Gentlemen, how are you tonight?
Doing good. Waiting on spring. The weather today was in the 40s, and I see some temperatures that start with the number 7 and the number 8, so I am waiting.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was in Nashville this past weekend, and I honestly almost didn't bring long pants because I'm in South Texas, and we've been in what you guys would consider summer mode for a while. And
you're in
I
knickers
really
and culottes.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't even occur to me that not only did I need long pants, I needed a jacket, which is distressing for me. But thank God I'm back and don't have to worry about this crummy weather anymore. But April's a good month because it's the draft, and I'm a draftaholic, as most of us are. I know, Rich, you are.
Yeah. I mean,
So that's exciting.
I used to be, but the bloom has rubbed off.
Well, just wait till we have to ask you to fill in on the Hog's Die on one of these draft shows and see how.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, I don't track the players as much anymore, but I can get up to speed. I used to love the draft, and I used to go and hang out outside it in New York City, and I watched it back in the mid '90s when you had to be a real nerd.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this 3-day. I think we talked about it last year around this time, but the 3 days of drafting is just ridiculously dumb.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that. It's dumb, but it's all about money and it's about ratings. And actually, this year they're broadcasting on 3 different networks. ESPN has it, NFL Network has it, and I think CBS. Don't hold me to CBS, but there's a third network that's televising it. So it's just crazy. But it's all about money. I mean, they don't have to do any show. They could just do it in the NFL front office if they wanted and publish the results.
Yeah, and I'm all right with a little bit of showbiz, but it's gotten ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's become a spectacle.
They sell hope, They dress these guys up. They dress them up. And, I'm going to tell you, and this is actually pretty good. The red carpet part of the draft show is ridiculous. It's stupid. I get guys get to, they interview them on the red carpet with their mothers and their dads and their girls. That's a little bit too much for me.
It is for me. I find it a bit ridiculous because these are 21-year-old kids. Yeah. They're treated like movie stars, and we sit and wonder why some of them have attitude problems. Yes. And well, there's Exhibit 1.
Yeah. Where guys like Matt Ioannidis and guys like Anthony Lanier, who actually deliver, don't get that opportunity to do that.
And then meanwhile, the Sue Cravens of the world,
There you go.
Well, it's like a guy like Joe Thomas. If you guys remember, for Joe Thomas on draft day was fishing with his father.
Yeah.
Because it was some kind of tradition for that weekend. Yeah. They always did it, and and the guy he's retired now, but he had no attitude at all.
Yeah.
Those are the guys I admire. I'm not so into the Sue Cravens of the world.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's funny that sort of red carpet and the kind of Hollywood parts of it. They do a lot of that stuff in the other parts of the league and in other sports too to attract more, female fans. But maybe beside Rich's wife, it's pretty difficult probably to attract female fans to that level of draft nerddom. Yeah. So maybe chill down.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, isn't your wife a football junkie though?
No, she is. I mean, it's funny because the quick story is that my wife and I, we've been married. It'll be 22 years in July, and we were going through a pretty rough patch. So she figured, how can I, spice things up a little bit? And actually, 2012, she really was like, I'm going to focus on partnering with Redskins, and we're going to be all Redskins. And we are Redskins. You've seen my pictures. She's all Redskins down. We go to the draft together. She knows football. It's not like where, well, what is that, honey? What did you do? No,
she's not looking at him. She's not looking at him at the red carpet. She's wondering about the 40 time.
Yeah, yes, right. She loves football, so that's our little bonding time. So we usually go to, the little local stuff that the local radio stations have. So it's pretty good.
Well, there you go. Maybe your wife could run seminars on.
Hey, man! The way to a man's heart is through his football.
All right. Well, with that, we will transition to the maybe less open-minded discussion of the Masters, considering their history with female admissions and fans, and talk a little bit about the coverage of the Masters and the Tiger Woods phenomenon. Steve, you pulled this story out of the great blog Awful Announcing, so you want to give us the quick 411?
Sure. Awful Announcing published an article on the 10th of April. For those of you who want to look it up, it's called CBS Showed 18 Shots from Well Out of Contention Tiger Woods. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because there truly is a Tiger Woods phenomenon in golf. And first of all, I'd just like to say, this is a little off topic, but in terms of the Masters in Augusta, that's the most backward group of people in on the planet. If people don't realize this, I mean, they didn't admit women until 5 or 6 years ago. They didn't have any minorities at all as members until a few years ago. It's just, it's just crazy. But regardless, golf, what this article shows, let me just give you the numbers and you guys can react to it. The ratings for this year's Master with Woods playing through the weekend were up double digits from last year when he did not play. And in terms of coverage, CBS covered all 71 strokes for Patrick Reed, who won the tournament. Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, who were up in the top 5, 58 shots. Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, also up at the top of the leaderboard, significant coverage. Well, Tiger was never in contention at all, ever. Even in the earliest, going back all the way to the earliest rounds on Thursday, they televised 18 shots of Tigers for a guy who was tied for 40th going into Sunday. That is the Tiger Woods effect. So up double digits and 18 of his about 70 strokes televised live. There is a very significant amount of the population out there who only pays attention to golf because of Tiger Woods. In spite of all his troubles, in spite of all his personal weaknesses, he is an absolute phenomenon that the PGA counts for and begs for to play in these tournaments. Thoughts on Tiger Woods?
Well, first of all, to your point about people being backwards, they don't want the Southern, they don't want us Northern carpetbaggers to have any sort of interference in the way that we do business down here. But no, Tiger Woods, I think it's more of a redemption story. People love a good comeback story. No matter, and Tiger Woods is probably, from what I hear, is probably one of the biggest jerks. Not really nice to media, fans. I've heard he's notoriously cheap. But for some reason, it looks as if he hit rock bottom and people like a good redemption story. I agree with you. There's no real reason. I don't know if any other place in sports would they cover such an insignificant performance by an individual. But it is Tiger Woods. And people, I would probably say a lot of people were there to probably try to witness history with Tiger Woods back on the Masters trail.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you're the one that did that impression, not me. Number one.
No, I was trying to sound like I was trying to sound like a southern gentleman. It was it was no other anything else other than that.
Little leghorn, foghorn in there.
Yeah, there it is. I used to love foghorn, leghorn.
Because quite frankly, I think the Masters people would appreciate me and not you, and for not a good reason. Those people are like that down there in Augusta, unfortunately. Yeah. But in terms of Tiger, I think the reason why the golf fans are so fascinated with Tiger, yes, it's a redemption story, but for me, it's more than that. It's this guy is, I think, in its prime was the most dominant professional athlete I've ever seen in any sport, in college, pro, anything. I can't speak to soccer players. I don't know. But Tiger, I've never seen a more dominant athlete than Tiger, and it was just so much fun watching him just absolutely bulldoze the PGA back, in its heyday. And so for me, I watched a good chunk more of the Masters than I normally would just to see if that was going to happen again.
I mean,
that's it.
I can't. I have no connection to golf. I find it boring, elitist, all those things.
It is.
But I have to admit, when I got a whiff of just being in the media culture, that Tiger was a little bit on a comeback, and I know he'd done well in some smaller tournaments. It definitely had me peeking at the results going into the weekend. And to me, anyone who would be shocked and outraged that he got so much coverage is just ridiculous. And Steve, your numbers on the ratings back that up, so it's empirically proven his worth still. And I also agree with Rich around the redemption story. Funny little aside, the other big story that kind of came out over the last couple of weeks about Tiger was that in the late 90s in Las Vegas, the casinos had $1 million credit line that Tiger Woods had access to. So I can't even imagine. Anyway.
Why does a guy who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars need $1 million line of credit? I'm just wondering.
Well, it's just because it's just how they coddle you to keep you in the building.
They won't give us 1 red cent, but
Well,
feel free.
You swipe the card, you might get a trip to the buffet. They have peon reward programs. But anyway, but the other thing is golf is just, past the norm, is boring right now. I mean, you also don't have Phil Mickelson, right? Was at least some balance.
Phil is back. Phil is back and playing, at least now.
But I'm saying those were the two big draws, and even Phil compared to Tiger was kind of a CD to Tiger's A. And so I know if you're a golf head, there's all kinds of young guys and all that, but there is nobody that even tickles the fancy of public interest really right now.
No, I think maybe Rory McIlroy is the only one. But where I wanted to go with this is the sport of golf. It's not just the fans and the ratings. The other golfers owe Tiger a lot. Because if you go back before his time, the purses in these tournaments were significantly less. And for those of you who don't realize this, these tournaments aren't charities, okay? They do. There's a charitable component to it, but a lot of it is based on the income they receive from the media coverage, from the television coverage and whatnot. And Tiger's playing in his dominance has sent the ratings for all these tournaments, even the lesser tournaments, through the roof. And so the purses are a lot bigger directly because of the way he played up until about 10 years ago when his life spiraled out of control. And so he's not just had an effect on the TV networks and the ratings and the fans. He's actually had a direct impact on the amount of money that the other golfers are making. So it's like no one else.
So let me say this. Before Tiger Woods came, I never watched golf. It was when I wanted to take a nap on Sunday. I turned, no disrespect to golf fans. I have a lot of friends that are golf fans, but it's new. I used to turn on golf to take a nap because I didn't want to turn on a sporting event that would have a lot of loud cheering that would wake me up. There was quiet talk. It was quiet. I might roll over and see Jack Nicklaus or, Arnold Palmer or Tom Kite or any one of those guys, but it was not something that we watch. I agree. It's elitist. But another thing from a standpoint is that Tiger Woods has a lot of people who may not have ever played golf, not necessarily at the professional level, but on municipal courses and also in their local country clubs. That I'm sure if we really dig into it, probably country club memberships are up around the country.
Oh, I think he's absolutely gotten a lot of young kids playing golf earlier because he was such a force on the tour. There's a lot of kids who otherwise would never have played golf who are players today. A lot of these young guys that Chris mentioned, like the Rory McIlroys of the world and Patrick Reed, who won the Masters, and Ricky Fowler. Well, they all grew up idolizing this guy. They are professional golfers in part because of Tiger Woods. I think he's had I don't want to get too hyperbolic here, but I think he's had a bigger impact on his particular sport than any other athlete I can think of, except maybe Larry Bird and Magic Johnson in the NBA. Because those two rescued the NBA from the doldrums. But other than those two, I can't think of any athlete in the modern era who's had a greater effect on his or her sport than Tiger. It's really and truly amazing what has happened. And this year's Masters ratings, said it all. They said it all. And by the way, and Tiger was the betting favorite going into the weekend, which is just crazy. Not going into the weekend, going into Thursday, which is crazy. But that's just how big of an impact he has on everything.
One of my favorite betting lines when Tiger was in his prime was that you could take the field versus Tiger. And in a sport with odds like golf has, just an individual competition, the amount of players, the randomness of the sport, that it was actually a viable bet to take Tiger versus field and get action on both sides of it. It was amazing.
Yeah, and that happened every week. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the betting houses would actually do that, it's just amazing.
Do you think he wins another major?
Yes.
Yes.
And I heard them say that if he wins another major, he breaks Jack's record.
No, it's not one. He's got to get 4.
No, I know. I'm just saying if he wins another one, then it'll propel for a second win. Yeah, for a second wind in his career.
I mean, I'm by no means a golf expert. I do play a little bit, but I'm a terrible golfer.
Mm-hmm.
But I have watched it some over the years. And, I mean, Tiger looks more like himself now than he has in years. Mm-hmm. So I think he can get there. The Masters, he didn't putt well at times, and he didn't drive well. It's a long course, so the Augusta really isn't made for the weaknesses that remain in his game. But he's going to get there. I think he's going to start winning again. To answer your question,
let me ask you guys this, because this is interesting. What do you guys think of all of the fist pumping and the trash talking and during the? I mean, that's a huge. That's like a huge faux pas in the golf world. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's funny you say that, actually, because Augusta National is worse than any other golf course about
right.
that. And they actually had a list of words that you could not say on the golf course. And it's just dumb things, like some of the Howard Stern stuff that people yell. And
Baba
what's
Booey,
the thing
Baba
from...
Booey.
Yeah, that. And then this thing from the beer commercial, Dilly Dilly. And there was a whole bunch
I hate. It's time to retire that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I do too. I hate all of it, actually, because the Howard Stern stuff isn't funny really either. But a part of it is just the snooty, obnoxious Augusta National green jacket people. But a part of me says that golf needs to stop taking itself quite so seriously. They're not, designing, nuclear warheads here. It is a game, and it's supposed to be entertainment. People are supposed to have fun. I think as long as it's not interfering with the golfers, I don't have a huge problem with the fans yelling stuff. But I don't wear a green jacket.
Well, also from there's the fans' rowdiness, which I think, and then also the sort of more individuality and of the players themselves, both of which are still part of the Tiger phenomenon. One, he brought a different crowd to golf, so they're younger, rowdier, larger. And two, even though Tiger really wasn't like this on the golf course, younger players knew they had to start building a brand. They started needing to stick out. So these are all, they're not the major kind of financial repercussions that you talk about, Steve. But I think, and I agree with you about your assertion around Tiger and his influence on the sport. But you even go those radiuses out, and those type of things still kind of come from the Tiger phenomenon.
Well,
One thing before we move on. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it just the last point I want to make is also in terms of sponsorships. The only other golfer I can ever remember that has serious sponsorships, Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, and even what they had didn't paled in comparison. Maybe Arnold Palmer is the only one that I think even came close to doing what Tiger did in the world of sponsorships. I mean, Tiger sponsored everything in his heyday. Gatorade, everything. And Arnold Palmer had some of that, but he really brought Tiger brought golf into the forefront in that arena as well. I mean, it's just amazing the impact this guy has had on the sports landscape. I mean, I watch him because we're never going to see another athlete in our generation with this kind of impact. That's really why I watch him. But sorry, Chris, go ahead.
But did he have a cool drink named after him? No, I was just going to say, sort of a transition here, as we're going to move on to our next topic. But one thing that is always interesting around this time of year is to kind of marvel at Jim Nance's run. He literally goes from the Final Four right into the Masters. And so if you think of sort of sports media legends who have like a time in the calendar by the stranglehold, Jim Nance's run there, and that whatever that is, that 3-4 week stretch, is pretty wild.
The dude must take a huge vacation after the Masters is over. You know, he's got the ultimate golf voice, though.
Yeah,
but he's got. Just imagine transitioning. Though you're right. I mean, going from having to call basketball games, having that in your head, to having all the golf stuff in your head with no prep time. Basically, it is pretty amazing. I hadn't thought about that. Pretty amazing.
He literally lives on the golf course at Pebble Beach.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to our next story. We're going to talk a little bit about they're now the Florida Marlins, right? Again?
Is it?
The Marlins of Miami and Florida, all the same thing. And, you know, this is the inaugural season of one Derek Jeter, who, you know, I love. You can all yell at me, but I do love Derek Jeter. But it is his inaugural run as owner and basically general manager of the Marlins. And so far, things have been a little bit bumpy, up to and including seeing literally no bump in fan excitement or attendance that I think some people thought that Jeter might be able to bring. So, one, we kind of look at what the heck is going on there, and can anyone save that franchise, which feels like it's in perpetual emergency. And then also think about, you know, do players make good owners?
Well, you know, the answer, first of all, it is the Miami Marlins, you guys. I mean, for you non-baseball fans out there. But I think the obvious answer here is no. You know, because, look, I mean, Jeter has done awful things with the Miami Marlins. He's traded away every good player. He's gotten incredibly cheap, and the fans have responded. You know, it's he has single-handedly ruined his great reputation. Put it that way.
I think that's to put it lightly. Derek Jeter, I mean, to Chris's initial point, Derek Jeter was probably one of the most universally beloved players in Major League Baseball. I mean, Ortiz, Jeter, they're probably the face of baseball, aside from the steroid era, but that's a whole nother conversation. They're probably the face of baseball for the last 15, 20 years. And you are correct. I think he has sullied his reputation as a player, and I think players should be a little cautious about stepping off the field right into front office or ownership. I mean, you know, I'm sure we were going to talk about it, but Michael Jordan has not had that success.
I mean, and Michael Jordan has had far more success than Jeter. But here's the thing about Jeter and the Marlins. Excuse me. They came from a guy named Jeffrey Loria. Jeffrey Loria was hated in Miami because the fans, rightfully so, were given the impression that he was the ultimate penny pincher. He didn't care about winning. He took a few $100 million in public funds to build a stadium and promised it would get better, and it didn't. And so then Derek Jeter, the hero of New York City, comes in here, and Mr. Baseball, you know, the modern day, you know, Joe DiMaggio, you know, practically in terms of impact on the game, and he comes in and promptly destroys everything. You know, and he single-handedly completely ruined his reputation. You know, I mean, Chris, you are a New York guy. Give us your impression.
Well, I think, you know, well, first of all, nothing can destroy Derek Jeter's reputation in New York City. Now, that may just be, you know, just here, and it could be destroyed everywhere else, and definitely destroyed within Major League Baseball. But I mean, not to mention the fact that he traded Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees. So outside of New York, I'm sure this is happening. Inside of New York, that he's still number 2, Derek Jeter, the captain, all that nonsense. So, you got to give him. He has to have a little bit of time, and this is also a doomed franchise. I mean, this has been in and out of these kind of things, and I just don't think that area is going to ever support a team. That does not alleviate that he has, in his short time, decimated the team.
Well, let's talk about also the finances of what he's done here. Derek Jeter doesn't actually have sports team ownership money. He's a very wealthy guy, and he's way wealthier than any of us, all of us put together will ever be. But he's nowhere near billionaire status that most of these guys are. And so he and his partners have taken on a ton of debt. And the result of taking the ton of debt is that payroll had to go down. Their profit margins had to go up because they've got a ton of debt service to pay. And so I think the fans in Miami, rightfully so, probably under the impression that money is more important than winning down there, and that's the source of the problem. But the other thing is, Jeter, a great guy, very charismatic, but who decided he's a businessman? Mm-hmm. He's running a billion-dollar corporation now. Who decided that he's qualified except him?
Well, could that have been marketing? Could that have been, the great...
Definitely was marketing. Yeah, of course it was marketing. Yeah. I mean, I think Major League Baseball went overboard, above and beyond, to make sure he had a team.
Right.
Because he's one of the very few people in baseball that had an unassailable reputation. So I think baseball absolutely wanted him involved in the game, and so they gifted to him and his group with the Marlins in spite of some financial limitations of his group. And that's kind of the source of the problem.
What's interesting is, so everybody knows, I'm an educator. I'm a career educator, a public school teacher. I'm a current principal. I can't see myself, I can't run a non-profit educational, a for-profit educational agency. I feel like I'm a good educator. I won't say great. I'm a good educator in the public sector. But if I try to step outside of that and run a for-profit agency, I don't have any experience in it. That's not my background. I just don't feel like that's something I would want to step into that realm. So,
and the analogy, and that's obviously a good analogy to Jeter. But go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Well, it's also Derek Jeter's been baseball through his entire formative young adult and heading into. So it's not what other skills has he really picked up to your point, Steve. Didn't even have a traditional educational journey that most people would go on that might give them some diversity or variety in the kind of things that they can and should do. So I mean the whole thing is ridiculous. And if you actually go through the rogues gallery of players turned owners, it never really goes that well. I mean, I guess Rich, to your point, the jury's out on Michael Jordan still, but the early returns aren't strong. You've got some, minor stake guys like Magic Johnson.
I was about to say
Magic Johnson as a small stake owner in the Lakers. A funny one I discovered doing a little research was that Shaquille O'Neal is actually a minority owner in the Sacramento Kings.
That's just mind-boggling to me that Shaquille O'Neal owns part of the team he used to refer to as the Queens.
And then the one that is Nolan Ryan might be your most successful one. So put a pin in that one. He might. Well,
Nolan Ryan and Jordan both.
I think the jury's out on Jordan. But the one that's the most analogous to Jeter's situation right now on a lot of levels is Wayne Gretzky's spectacular flame out as owner, general manager, and all-around guy of, at the time, the Phoenix Coyotes in the NHL, who had formerly been the Winnipeg Jets. When he was part of the ownership team when they went bankrupt, he was ousted. The NHL actually had to own the team for about 4 years Jerry Reinsdorf was involved. There was lawsuits. There was multiple owners. There was threats of moving. The NHL inexplicitly fought to keep them in Arizona instead of having them move to Seattle, which makes zero sense. But so someone who was beloved, top of their sport, transformational player that just got humiliated in the realm of ownership and general managership. Jeter ought to call up his number 99 and maybe get a little bit of a cautionary tale.
I mean, it's a case of Major League Baseball, and back then, the National Hockey League, so desperate to capitalize on the PR of having a legend involved that they forgot about the business. And it's just, you'd think that 30 billionaires, I don't know how many hockey teams there are specifically, but you'd think that 30 billionaires would have a better sense of what it takes to be an owner. Really. I mean, like, for example, if you go back to Magic Johnson, Magic did own a piece of the Lakers, and he's now the team president of the Lakers. But that's his thing, and what he's doing. He's involved in the basketball side, and they have the Buss family there, as the owner. So he's not, and Magic Johnson is a very successful businessman in his own right.
Yeah, he could probably do it.
Yeah, he could probably do it. But in terms of he owned a piece of the Dodgers too, but he was just a pretty face, and he only owned, I think, 5% or something of the Dodgers, and they had other businessmen involved. So there's a way to do it and a way not to do it, and I'm just not sure. I have nothing against Derek Jeter. Don't misunderstand me. I mean, I enjoyed watching him play, but I think Major League Baseball needs to own the disaster that is the Marlins. And listen, I mean, the game that was on Sunday, the 8th of April, against the Mets, 7,000 in attendance. It was the lowest attended Major League Baseball game ever that didn't have a major weather problem, or there wasn't a situation where the teams were playing somewhere else. That like they played a game last year at the Little League World Series. Obviously, it's a small park. And I think the Orioles played a game because of riots one time with nobody in the stadium. But in terms of regular attended games, this was the worst attended game ever. So let that sink in.
Which is actually kind of even more amazing considering that the opponent was the New York Mets with so many expat New Yorkers in that region. So, that actually to me is a little flavor of an extra whammy on how pathetic that attendance is.
Yeah, and I mean, the Marlins aren't going to survive if they get that kind of attendance. Because baseball, more than football, relies a lot on attendance for their revenue stream.
And it was a expansion team to begin with, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I think that's another piece of it. It's not a traditional. It's not one of the, old guard baseball teams franchises.
No, and I think Miami is one of those places that isn't a particularly good sports town in some ways. It's kind of like Los Angeles because there's so much to do in Miami that if these teams aren't really doing well, I'm not sure. I'm not a resident of Miami, but I'm not sure the residents there really dive into it too deep unless the teams are good. Like they're all about the Heat because the Miami Heat because the Heat have been good for a long time now, and they were all about the Dolphins when Dan Marino was the quarterback. But when you have, it's not like Pittsburgh, where there's nothing to do but watch football and baseball. This is Miami, so it's not a particularly. I don't think it's a great spot for a baseball team in the first place. I think Chris, you kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, they're a doomed franchise. They always have been, and they still have 2 World Series, which is amazing. Actually,
and they gave Giancarlo Stanton away. They gave away all their entire outfield, which was strictly and obviously a money move. It has no basis in baseball to it whatsoever, and the fans are right to be upset about it. I don't blame them a single bit.
So, speaking of Pittsburgh, that does give us, I think, the definitive best player turned owner, and which is pains for me to say because I literally hate no team like I hate the Pittsburgh Penguins, even the Cowboys. But since 1999, Mario Lemieux has owned the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's definitive the best player turned owner.
Because Pittsburgh Penguins have won the Stanley Cup at least once, didn't they? Didn't they win the Stanley Cup?
3 times, I think, since he's owned.
And they own the Caps, so.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
He owns the Caps too.
So that's a long stretch of winning, and that's maybe the best example I can find.
Well, I've always said this about sports owners. And about winning franchises. Consistently winning franchises always start at the top. You always have an owner that's dedicated to winning, that has a vision for his team, and understands how to build a winning organization. If you look at the teams that have historically won, the Yankees, the Lakers, other than put the post-death of Jerry Buss Lakers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants have consistently won. All those teams have the Patriots with Robert Kraft, they have very strong owners who know what they're doing and have a philosophy. And I've seen absolutely none of that from Derek Jeter whatsoever. It's all about money.
Well, we're going to transition to our third and final topic of the evening, but I'll give you one kind of funny one as we transition out. Did anyone would have pegged Warwick Dunn as a small minority owner of the Atlanta Falcons?
I didn't know that.
Yep, he bought it he got a minority stake, on his way out after retiring.
I've often wondered that if it would be smart if like Darryl Green retires from the Redskins, give him a little stake in it. I've always wondered why more teams didn't do that. I think that'd be a nice thing for franchise legends. They did it for Magic Johnson. That's how Magic got his stake in the Lakers.
Yeah, interesting.
For example,
interesting. There was an article not too long ago about the Redskins minority partners not being happy with Snyder's leadership of the team, and you don't hear about the minority partners. That's probably why they call it minority. But it'd be interesting to dig a little deeper to see what's going on there.
I have. Those guys are all his longtime business partners. Basically, they've been with him for years in other businesses. The NFL does not like minority shareholders to speak, because the governing documents of each football team say that you have to designate one person as the official owner. And for the case of the Redskins, that's Dan Snyder. So they don't want these other guys talking. That's really not what the NFL in any way wants to happen.
So what about the Packers? Because aren't they like the whole state, the whole city?
The Packers, the Packers are grandfathered. No other team will be like the Packers. The Packers have a management council, and then they are owned by the fans. Now, what's interesting about that, and we're going to get to the third topic here in a minute, but what's interesting about the fan ownership of the Packers is you can buy a share of the Packers, but there's no income that can be derived from your ownership of the shares. They are literally printing money. You pay the fee to own a share of the Packers, and you get literally nothing but a stock certificate, and that's it. All the income goes to the core group of the management council of the Packers. So it's literally a case of quite literally printing money, for the Packers. So
Packers about to turn 100 years old this next NFL season. All right, well, we're going to stay, sort of in the realm of the NFL, not exclusively, but there's been some stories with some cheerleaders and issues of cheerleading and sexual abuse. Maybe it's the cheerleaders Me Too moment, I'm not quite sure, but this has sort of bubbled up over the last couple weeks, including some pretty harrowing statements in an article, I think it was in the New York Times, right, Steve? That said
it was New York Times.
That groping and sexual harassment was just part of the workplace for NFL cheerleaders.
Yeah, what caught my interest originally was there was a cheerleader for the Saints named Bailey Davis who got fired from the Saints a couple of weeks ago for posting what the Saints viewed as a racy picture on her personal Instagram. And so she got fired for that. Now, understand this about cheerleaders. They get paid absolutely nothing. They get paid minimum wage, basically. They actually spend more than they make when it comes to body maintenance and nails and hair and all that stuff. All that stuff comes out of their pocket. So they make absolutely no money whatsoever. They're doing it for the love of cheerleading and to be involved in NFL teams or pro teams. But the article from the New York Times that is today, or rather the 10th of April, cheerleaders say groping and sexual harassment are part of the job. What happens is that first of all, these cheerleaders have a ton of rules about fraternization. They can't do. There are all sorts of things. They can't have players following them on Instagram. They can't say hello to players. They can't talk to players. They can't do anything. But what the article really delved into was how these women are subjected to basically sexual harassment from not from players but from fans. And the teams send them out there to go to these events with no security, no team rep whatsoever, and they're just kind of on their own. Our very own, the one, I'll turn it over to you guys, get your thoughts. The one Redskins related story in this thing cited a situation where the Redskins sent five cheerleaders to some random guy's house. It said, go to this address, and didn't give these women any instructions at all. Just go to this house. And it was just a bunch of guys watching football. It very creepy. The guys were a bunch of older guys who were very creepy and didn't treat him well. These women are subjected to a lot of things, and it actually exposes the franchise to potential. You have employment law issues, with sexual harassment in the workplace, all sorts of stuff that can go wrong. So it's a lot for these women to do what they do. Thoughts?
Why do NFL teams even have cheerleaders?
It's a throwback to days gone by.
It makes no sense. I can't hear them. I can barely see. I mean, I have pretty good seats when I go to games. And, unless they're on the, unless they're on the Jumbotron, I can't really see them. I don't pay attention to them. I'm sure they have great figures. I've seen some up close, but that's just not what I'm interested in. I just wonder why they even have them. And I think this is a great topic, because I think this is probably one of the next big sort of things the NFL will have to address is the sexual harassment issues with cheerleaders.
I just wanted people out there to understand what these ladies go through. It is a ton of work for what amounts to a very, very poor paying part-time job in which they are subjected to all sorts of awful things and have all sorts of awful rules for the honor of being on TV and being a part of, a NFL or NBA franchise. It's a lot. And, I think it's coming to the forefront a little bit. And I do agree, Rich, that I think this may be the turning point where these sports teams are going to have to do something. Because really, it's sexist. Isn't it sexist? To have women in skimpy outfits, especially at a time when there's the Me Too movement and, NFL is trying to attract more female fans, and they're going, they're doing everything they can to attract female fans. And the way to do that is not to put women in push-up bras and skimpy skirts, out there on the field.
Well, also, I think where you might even be more right, I think, yes, you're right that it's sexist, but if this is just going to be carrying giant legal liability for these teams, what's the fastest way to eliminate that liability is to eliminate the risk. So, eventually if it just gets too hot and expensive and risky to carry cheerleading squads, then they'll just, especially if the overhead on them is so low anyway, basically, they'll just do away with them.
Well, here's the thought. Put a little bit more money into the cheerleading. Why not send security with them? There's no reason why a team couldn't send somebody from PR, with them on these trips. Send, some of Redskins security with them, team security with them. Spend a little bit more money in this thing. Lighten up with some of the fraternization rules, make it a little bit more palatable. Spend a little bit more money on it, and it might be fine. In terms of that, the sexist part of it, that's another issue.
And cheerleading as a, quote unquote sport is actually come a long way. Like cheerleading in high school and college, like there are really more tumbling squads and things like that. But in these pro leagues, it hasn't really that piece hasn't caught up, and it would be more investment, right? You need a different caliber of cheerleader. You wouldn't be so overtly selling sex, and really no one wants to see like a tumbling run out, right? So like it's not like competitive cheerleading is in the collegiate and high school level, where it really has just become like a sport. So there is no point in professional cheerleading squads. The NHL just added them a couple years ago, of all things.
Well, what's interesting is in the NBA and the NFL, it's really a stepping stone. I mean, these girls, some of them, I won't overgeneralize, but they're entertainers, they're aspiring dancers, they aspire to get into the entertainment field. I happen to, she actually goes to my church, and I saw her last week. She's a Redskins cheerleader, and she has a family, and I won't say her name, but she makes nothing, and she's living in someone else's house. I'm talking about someone else's parents' house. So it is not a lucrative thing, but maybe they look for it to be a stepping stone to something else. But and also, if the other thing is, if you look at in NBA cheerleaders and NFL cheerleaders, there's a difference. I won't say what the difference is, but check them out.
Was that our first ever Easter egg?
Yes, it is. If you look, I'll say it off air, but if you look at NBA cheerleaders and NFL cheerleaders, tell me the difference.
Okay, you're gonna have to tell me off air because
I'll
I'm
tell you
dying
off
to know
air.
what it is.
And it's not.
Okay.
It's nothing bad. It's nothing bad.
Okay,
I don't want our listeners to think that it's like anything like lewd or anything like that.
It's just business, listeners and fans. Go and come up with your best assertions, your theories, your sleuthing about what Rich identifies as the key difference between NBA and NFL cheerleaders, and tweet the Hogsty account with your theories.
I'll tell you what. We'll do this. If anybody comes up with the right answer, the first person that comes up with the right answer will get a Hogsty T-shirt.
Ooh.
All right, something that I don't even have. All right,
You have to buy it. You have to buy it, Rich.
You're like
But
a
Rich
cheerleader.
needs to tell me. Rich needs to tell me the answer so I know if anybody actually won. That's a trick.
All right, so maybe with that we will bid adieu. But now, listeners, dear listeners, you have your quest, your marching papers, your orders, and your reward. So there is a reward system out there for you. But that brings us to another episode close. Rich, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at DiscoQ5, DISCOQUE5.
All right, and you can find me at ChrisLarry33, and it's where in the world is Steve? It's like where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Steve, where can they find you?
You can find me at the Hogsty on Twitter.
There you go, and that's where you can send your theories about NBA versus NFL cheerleaders. We look forward to it.
All right, guys.
See you next time.
Bye.